It started with little things, barely noticeable at first, but they piled up, and something in me shifted. Victor used to be so present, so predictable. But lately, his smiles felt hollow, his words shorter. He began working late, claiming deadlines, urgent meetings, always some vague reason why dinner had to get cold. And his phone? Suddenly it never left his hand. Always face down, always with a quick tap or swipe when I got too close. I told myself not to overthink. But deep down, a quiet voice had already started asking the questions I didn't want answered. I tried to talk to him, gently, carefully, not because I didn't have a right to ask, but because I already knew how he'd react. He rolled his eyes, gave me that tired laugh and said, "You're imagining things. Stop being so dramatic." Dramatic. That word cut through me sharper than anything else. It wasn't the first time he'd said it, but it was the first time I didn't flinch. I just sat there, watching him like I was seeing him for the first time. Not the man I married, but a stranger wearing his voice. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just lay in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling while he scrolled through his phone. And in that silence, I made a decision. If he really thought I was blind, if he believed I would keep swallowing his lies with a smile, then he had no idea who he was really married to. The next few days, I paid attention. Real attention. Not the casual glances of a wife trying to give space, but the kind of watchfulness that comes from knowing something's rotting beneath the surface. I watched how he texted with a smirk and angled his body away from me. How his cologne was stronger. How he shaved on days he never used to care. Every detail felt louder now, like a puzzle that had always been there, but I'd finally started to piece together. And with each new clue, I stopped asking why and started thinking what next. You see, I've never been the kind of woman to scream or make scenes. I believe in silence, the powerful kind, the kind that watches, that plans. While he was out doing God knows what, I was remembering the woman I used to be. Sharp, resilient, not some dramatic wife clinging to a fading marriage, but someone who knew how to stand on her own. I wasn't going to beg him for honesty. I was going to let him keep lying, because every lie gave me time. And time, I realized, was my greatest weapon. So I smiled more. I laughed when he made jokes. I kissed him goodnight and let him believe I was still in the dark. But something in my eyes must have changed, because every now and then he'd look at me just a second longer, like he couldn't quite read what was behind my calm. And the truth? That's exactly how I wanted it. There's a moment, a very specific kind of moment, when you stop loving someone and start watching them, not out of hate, but out of clarity. That was me now. Every dinner, every conversation, every casual touch he gave me, I received like an actress hitting her mark. I wasn't heartbroken, I was calculating. I watched him lie and wondered how long he'd keep it up. Did he think I was stupid? That I'd never noticed the scent that wasn't mine on his collar, or the hesitation when I asked who'd called? He thought he was pulling something off. He thought I was too busy, too trusting, too naive. And honestly, maybe for a while I was. But now I was wide awake. And the funny thing is, I didn't even want the truth from him anymore. I already knew it. What I wanted was control. Not to scream, not to destroy, but to leave when it hurt the most. On my terms, with my head held high and no part of myself left behind. So when he kissed my forehead that night, whispering, "I love you," I didn't flinch. I smiled, nodded, and set it back. And in my mind, I whispered something else entirely. "You're going to regret underestimating me." I became two women, the one he saw, soft, sweet, dutiful, and the one behind the curtain, silent and watchful. It started with his receipts. The ones he left crumpled in his pockets or tossed into the car's console, never thinking twice. I unfolded them carefully, like evidence from a crime scene. Dinners for two at places I'd never been, boutique hotel charges, and once, a florist. Roses. Red. I haven't received flowers from him in over a year. That told me everything I needed to know. Next came the locations. I quietly synced our shared accounts, tracked the pings, watched the routes. Always the same neighborhood. Always the same hours. It was methodical, almost insulting. I wasn't trying to catch him anymore. I was documenting him, building a file, piece by piece, lie by lie. One afternoon while he was in the shower, I found the second phone, hidden behind a stack of old boxes in the closet. I opened it, and there they were. The photos. Her face. His arms. Their smiles. And still, I didn't cry. I just put it back exactly where I found it, as if nothing had happened. Because in my world now, nothing had. Not yet. That night, I made his favorite meal, the one he always asked for on his birthday. I set the table, lit a candle, poured his wine just the way he liked it, half a glass, no ice, room temp. He walked in, kissed my cheek, and smiled like everything was fine. And I let him believe it was. We laughed. We talked. I even complimented his shirt, the same one he wore in those pictures with her. Inside, I was ice. But on the outside, I was the woman he thought he had completely fooled. Every night I kissed him goodnight and told him I loved him. Every morning, I packed his lunch and ironed his shirt. And while he went off to play pretend with her, I was on the phone with lawyers. Quiet voices, clear terms, no emotions, just facts and steps. I started moving small amounts of money, setting up accounts in my name only. One day, I even went to the bank and smiled at the teller while mentally calculating how long until I'd have enough to start fresh. It felt like I was digging a tunnel with a spoon. Slow, steady, but certain. But here's the thing. He had no clue. He looked at me and saw the same wife, the same woman who once cried when he forgot an anniversary. But that woman? She was gone. And the one wearing her face was someone new. Someone he had never met and wouldn't recognize even if she stared him right in the eye. At night, after he fell asleep beside me, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, rehearsing. Not just what I would say, but how I'd say it. Calm, direct, powerful. I didn't want revenge in the way people imagine it. I didn't want to scream or throw things or beg him to feel guilty. I wanted something cleaner, something colder. I wanted him to realize he'd lost me long before he even knew it was possible. That every moment I played the doting wife, I was actually slipping out of the cage he built around me. I started keeping a journal. Not for healing, not for closure, but as a timeline, a record. I documented the exact dates, the times, the details he thought would disappear into the fog of everyday life. There was power in it. Power in knowing that while he thought he was controlling the narrative, I was quietly writing my own. One with an ending he could never see coming. I'd reread it sometimes just to remind myself this wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. And the most ironic part? The better I became at pretending, the more he relaxed. He actually smiled more, held my hand in public again. Maybe he thought he'd gotten away with it. Maybe he believed his lie had taken root so deep that I'd stopped questioning it. But I hadn't. I was just waiting. And soon, very soon, he'd find out exactly how much I'd seen. I knew I was close. The pieces were all there. The evidence, the plan, the quiet fire burning behind every smile I gave him. But before I left, before I ended it on paper, I wanted one final act. One scene he'd remember for the rest of his life. So I got to work. I made copies of every bank statement, every message, every receipt. I signed a lease for a place that was mine. No shared bills, no shared walls. And I made sure my career was steady, like a bridge already built before the leap. I didn't want chaos. I wanted certainty. So I checked everything twice. My lawyer had all the files. My new apartment had fresh sheets and unopened dishes. My bank account had enough to get me through the storm. And through it all, I kept the rhythm of normal life. He kissed me goodbye in the mornings. I smiled, told him, "Have a good day," and watched him walk out the door like he wasn't heading straight into the trap he created himself. He had no idea what was coming, and I made sure to keep it that way. Then I circled a date on the calendar. Not for him, but for me. My liberation day. But before that, there was the dinner. One final performance. Candlelight, soft music, his favorite wine breathing on the table. I wanted him comfortable. I wanted him relaxed. I wanted him to feel, for just one more night, like he still had it all. He walked through the door like any other evening, loosened tie, keys in one hand, a tired sigh in the other. But when he saw the table, he paused. "What's the occasion?" he asked, smiling, surprised. I just laughed softly, shaking my head like a woman still in love. "Do I need a reason to spoil you?" I said. And just like that, he melted into the moment. He didn't suspect a thing. He kissed my cheek, complimented the roast, poured the wine like it was a celebration. And in a way, it was. Just not for him. We talked about nothing. His work, the weather, someone's new baby. I nodded, I listened, I laughed at all the right places. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I watched him the way a stranger would, studying the lines of his face, the way he held his glass, the small lies tucked into casual stories. It was almost fascinating, how easily he lived inside his delusion. How sure he was that he was winning, that I was still his, that I was still me. But the woman at that table wasn't his anymore. She belonged to herself now. He reached for my hand across the table, and I gave it to him. I let him hold it like it meant something. And in that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt release. Like I had just walked out of a long, dark hallway and could finally see the exit. He still thought the story was going the way he wrote it. But I had already rewritten the ending. After dinner, he leaned back in his chair, satisfied, full, relaxed, a little wine drunk. I cleared the dishes while he scrolled through his phone, the same one that held 1,000 lies. And I watched him from the kitchen, wondering if he'd ever realize how easy it was to fool him. Not because I'm deceptive, but because he never thought I could be. That was his mistake. He believed I needed him more than I needed the truth. And now, he was sitting in a house full of secrets, thinking he was safe. I tucked him in that night like nothing had changed, kissed his forehead, turned off the light, and whispered goodnight. He smiled in the dark and told me he loved me. And I said it back, calmly, evenly, with no weight behind the words. I lay beside him in silence, listening to his breathing slow as he drifted off. My mind wasn't on him anymore. It was on the next morning, on the papers, on the drive to my lawyer, on the sound his world would make when it finally cracked open. He slept like a man who thought he was loved, and I stayed awake like a woman who knew her moment was coming. Not with fury, not with chaos, but with something far more unsettling. Peace. I woke up before the sun. No alarm, no noise, just instinct. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that almost hums. He was still asleep, tangled in the sheets, unaware. I didn't even look back. I got dressed, grabbed the folder, and walked out like I was heading to the grocery store. But I wasn't. I was heading straight to my freedom. My lawyer was already waiting. I slid the folder across the table, and she opened it like a story she already knew. Photos, records, Dates, patterns, the full picture. There was no drama, just signatures, confirmations, steps. I'd already done the emotional work. Now it was logistics. She asked if I was ready. I told her I had been ready for weeks. We finalized the documents, reviewed the timeline, and I took a deep breath. Not because I was nervous, but because I finally felt like I was exhaling after holding it in for far too long. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. That surprised me. I guess part of me expected to feel broken. But I didn't. I felt clear. By the time I got home, the sun was high, and so was my sense of calm. I walked into that house not as a wife, not as a woman scorned, but as a woman carrying truth. Truth he couldn't twist, couldn't laugh off, couldn't erase. And when I saw him standing there in the kitchen, pouring his coffee like it was just another day, I realized he still had no idea today would be the last time we shared anything. He looked up, smiled lazily. "You're up early," he said, sipping his coffee like nothing had shifted in the universe. I didn't answer. I just set the divorce papers on the kitchen table, right beside his mug. Then, without a word, I pulled the USB drive from my bag and placed it next to them. That was when his smile faltered. He glanced at the papers, then at me. What is this?" he asked, trying to laugh. But there was no laughter in my face, only silence. He was good at pretending, but I was better. He picked up the folder, flipped through the first few pages, and I watched the color drain from his face. Names, phone numbers, timestamps, photos. He opened the USB folder on his laptop and found everything I knew he would. Call logs, text screenshots, hotel bills, all neat. All categorized, all undeniable. He tried to speak, tried to pull together a version of the truth that might still save him, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. "This isn't a discussion, it's a notification. I know everything." The air changed. He opened his mouth again, then closed it. For the first time in this whole mess, he looked small, powerless, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like standing in the eye of a storm that had already passed. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was just a man who didn't realize how far I'd gone before he even noticed I was leaving. He reached for me, not in love, not even in apology, but in desperation. And I took a step back, not because I was angry, but because I was done. "While you were busy cheating," I said, voice steady, "I was busy rebuilding without you." His eyes darted around the room like he was searching for something to anchor himself to, but there was nothing. Not a plea he could make, not a memory strong enough to change what I had already decided. The man who once made me feel chosen now looked like a stranger searching for the exit in his own life. He whispered my name, like maybe it would bring me back. But I didn't answer. I just gathered the papers, left a copy for him, and turned toward the door. And in that moment, I felt taller. Not stronger, taller. Like I had finally grown beyond the version of myself that once needed his love to feel complete. And as I reached for the doorknob, I paused, just for a second, to look at him one last time. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shouting. He was just still, like a man who'd realized too late that the game was over. And I walked out. Not because I hated him, but because I loved myself more than I ever had before. My new apartment wasn't fancy. It didn't have marble countertops or skyline views. But it was mine. The walls were bare, the fridge half empty, and the air smelled like fresh paint and lavender cleaner. Still, I stood in the middle of that little living room and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I kicked off my shoes, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. And I smiled, Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally let go of everything that had been weighing me down. I posted one photo, just one. Me, cross-legged, wine in hand, soft lighting from the window spilling across my face. No caption about heartbreak, no announcement. Just a line I knew would say everything. Some people lose diamonds while chasing stones. Within minutes, the messages started coming in. Friends, family, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Are you okay? What happened? You look free. And I was. I didn't owe anyone the full story. I had already lived it. What they saw in that photo was real, and I didn't need to explain it. Victor called. Of course he did. But I never picked up, not once. I didn't block his number out of spite. I blocked it because I no longer needed to hear what he had to say. There was nothing left for him to give me. Not closure, not answers, certainly not guilt. I had already taken everything I needed, and it didn't come from him. It came from within. The days that followed felt like waking up from a long, heavy sleep. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or watching someone else's moods to gauge how my day would go. I set my own alarm, made my own coffee just the way I liked it, strong, black, and quiet. I started listening to music again while I got dressed. I opened the windows, let the breeze in. The silence in my new space didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. It felt like I had made room for myself in a life I used to hand over to someone else. Some people were shocked. They couldn't believe it. But you two looked so happy, they said. Of course we did. That's what I'd let them see. That's what he needed them to see. But the truth? The truth had been living beneath the surface for a long time, hidden in late nights, sudden cold shoulders, and the ache you feel when the person lying next to you might as well be on another planet. I didn't care to explain it to everyone. I just let their confusion sit. Let it pass. Because I finally understood something. The people who matter don't need an explanation. And as for him, word got around. Quiet whispers, judging eyes. Some of his colleagues pulled away. A few friends messaged me, apologizing without using the word. I didn't celebrate his fall. I didn't need to. His unraveling wasn't my revenge. My peace was. My quiet, my calm, my freedom. That was the echo that followed every lie he ever told. A few weeks later, I walked into my new job. Fresh start, new team, clean slate. I wore the heels I hadn't touched in over a year, not for him, not for anyone else, but because they made me feel like I could walk through fire without flinching. I stepped into that office with my head held high, a quiet confidence in every movement. No one there knew my story. No one looked at me with pity or whispered behind my back. I was just Camilla. Not a wife, not a betrayal, not a headline. Just me. And that was the most powerful part. My story didn't end with heartbreak. It didn't end with confrontation or chaos. It ended with a woman sitting across from herself, finally choosing peace over performance. I didn't need to destroy him to reclaim myself. I just had to walk away, fully, completely, without hesitation. That was the kind of revenge that couldn't be undone. It didn't scream. It didn't beg. It just was. Sharp as truth. Soft as grace. I took a deep breath that morning. A full breath, with no weight on my chest. I straightened my blazer, looked out the window, and smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally was. And somewhere out there, a man was still trying to figure out how he lost something he thought he had forever, while I was too busy living to even notice.